Hello, my name is Skeeter Britton, and this is my presentation on Harry S. Truman. Truman was born May 8th, 1884 in Lamar, Missouri. Truman's family could not afford to send him to college. He spent over a decade helping his father manage the family farm, which was over 600-acre farm near Grandview, Missouri. During this time, he also enrolled in the National Guard. In 1917, when World War I was going on, he was in his early 30s and he re-enlisted in the National Guard and was sent to France. He saw action in several campaigns and was promoted to the captain of his artillery unit. In 1919, after returning from war, Truman married Elizabeth Wallace, his childhood classmate. The Trumans had one daughter, Mary Margaret Truman, who grew up to become a professional singer and author of biographies and mystery novels. A couple of quotes from Truman are, "It is amazing what you can accomplish if you do not care who gets the credit. There's nothing new in the world except the history you do not know." And a fun fact is that the S in Harry S. Truman didn't stand for a specific name. Truman's parents gave him the middle initial S to honor his grandfather, Anderson Shipp Truman. In 1934, Truman was elected to the U.S. Senate. As a senator, he supported the President Franklin Roosevelt New Deal program. It was designed to help lift the nation out of the Great Depression. Truman was instrumental in the passage of the Civil Aeronautics Act of 1938, which established government regulation of the aviation industry, and the Transportation Act of 1940, which established new federal regulations for America's railroad, shipping, and trucking industries. In 1944, as Roosevelt sought an unprecedented fourth term as president, Truman was selected as his running mate. In the general election, Roosevelt easily defeated Republican Thomas Dewey, the governor of New York, and was sworn into office on January 20th, 1945. Less than 3 months later, on April 12th, 1945, the president died suddenly of a cerebral hemorrhage at the age of 63. Several hours after learning of Roosevelt's death, Truman was given the oath of office in the White House. Upon assuming the presidency, Truman, who had met privately with Roosevelt only a few times, had never been informed of the atomic bomb. During Truman's initial months in office, the war in Europe ended when the Allies accepted Nazi Germany's surrender on May 8th. In an effort to end the war in the Pacific and prevent the massive U.S. casualties that could result from an invasion of Japan, Truman approved the dropping of the atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima on August 6th and Nagasaki on August 9th. Japan's surrender was announced on August 14, 1945. However, Truman's use of the atomic bomb continues to be one of the most controversial decisions of any American president. Aftermath of the war, the Truman administration had to contend with deteriorating U.S.-Soviet relations and the start of the Cold War. The president adopted a policy of containment towards Soviet expansion and the spread of communism in 1947. He introduced the Truman Doctrine to provide aid to Greece and Turkey in an effort to protect them from the communist aggression. That same year, Truman also instituted the Marshall Plan, which gave billions of dollars in aid to help stimulate economic recovery in European nations. Aftermath of the war, the Truman administration had to contend with deteriorating U.S.-Soviet relations and the start of the Cold War. The president adopted a policy of containment towards Soviet expansion and the spread of communism in 1947. He introduced the Truman Doctrine to provide aid to Greece and Turkey in an effort to protect them from the communist aggression. That same year, Truman also instituted the Marshall Plan, which gave billions of dollars in aid to help stimulate economic recovery in European nations. On the home front, Truman was faced with the challenge of transitioning America to a peacetime economy. Amid labor disputes, a shortage of consumer goods, and a national railroad strike, he saw his approval ratings plummet. He ran for re-election in 1948 and was widely expected to lose to Republican challenger Thomas Dewey. However, Truman conducted a vigorous whistle-stop campaign in which he traveled by train around the country, giving hundreds of speeches. The president and his running mate Alden Barkley won the election against Dewey. Harry Truman was sworn in for his second term in January 1949. His inauguration was the first to be nationally televised. The president set forth an ambitious social reform agenda known as the Fair Deal, which included national medical insurance, federal housing programs, a higher minimum wage, assistance for farmers, repeal of the Taft-Hartley Labor Act. That's my dog. All right. The president set forth an ambitious social reform agenda known as the Fair Deal, which included national medical insurance, federal housing programs, a higher minimum wage, assistance for farmers, repeal of the Taft-Hartley Labor Act, increase in Social Security, and civil rights reforms. The threat of communism continued to be a major focus of Truman's second administration. The president supported the creation in 1949 of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, also known as NATO. In June 1950, when communist forces from North Korea invaded South Korea, Truman sent in U.S. planes and ships and ground troops to aid the South Koreans. The conflict turned into a lengthy stalemate that left Americans frustrated and hurt Truman's popularity. However, his decisions to intervene ultimately preserved South Korea's independence. Although he was eligible to run for another presidential term, Truman announced in March 1952 that he would not do so. Truman died at the age of 88 on December 26, 1972, in Kansas City, Missouri. He was buried in the courtyard of the Truman Library. His wife, who died at the age of 97 in 1982, was also buried beside him. I chose Harry S. Truman because his house in Grandview, Missouri was only a few miles from where I grew up. The Truman Library is a staple point in Kansas City, and there's several streets, names, monuments around Kansas City that's named after him. He was always known to me as one of the greatest presidents. Truman will always be my favorite president, and that concludes my presentation of Harry S. Truman.